Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We're live again, July 15, 2007. I know that says interesting drug by Morrissey, but that's not what it was.
And it might be my fault. I might have put the wrong track.
And who knows? We'll sort that out later. We're just glad to be on the air again. For those of you who try to watch regularly, we haven't been on for the past 2 weeks. They've been rewiring the mini studio. They put in new equipment. The mini studio looks completely different. So actually, I suppose we're lucky that anything's even working. So anyway, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We're live. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week is Tracie Harris. And we'll be talking about your brain on religion in just a few minutes. But we want to get the regular announcements out of the way. As we said, we haven't been on for a couple of weeks. So hello, welcome back. We hope you're all watching. This is a live, interactive, public access television program. We'll have the telephone number for you shortly. You'll be able to call in and ask your questions or make comments or discuss the topic that we're talking about or whatever you want. It's an opportunity for atheists in the Austin area to communicate with non-atheists and other atheists, as well as worldwide. The audio portion of this program is available for download at our website, www.atheist-community.org. And the video has now been uploaded to Google Video. You can go to atheist-experience.com and go into the archive, and there'll be links there to the video as well as the podcast downloads. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit education organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA meets every Sunday at 11 o'clock at Ventana del Sol on East Oldhorf, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. An August lecture will actually be me. August 5th, I'll give the lecture that I was going to give like in June or whatever that we got postponed and shifted around. So if you're in the Austin area, you know, you're welcome to come down for that. We'll be talking a little bit about, it's going to mostly be a slideshow with pictures of religious art that pertains to hell, and we'll be discussing the history of hell and different religions and some concepts. Hey, that's a good idea. And we'll talk a little bit about how hell's been viewed by different religions and what the relevance is today, and also just enjoy some nifty art. I like religious art. I like religious architecture. I don't remotely think that any of these are because a God exists. I happen to think that probably it's because religions had all the money and the control, so they could hire the better artists. But in any case, we can get off on that a little bit later. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information about the program, how to download the podcast. We were live yesterday. We'll be live again on the 28th, I believe, from 2 to 3:30, roughly, Central Time. You can't call in live to that program, but you can listen live. And we have an internet chat service that we run in conjunction with the show so that the listeners can communicate with each other and with us when we're not too busy. Lots of good news with that show. We replaced a lot of equipment, so we have a new sound mixing board and some other stuff. I've added a laptop to the scheme so that what used to happen, I don't want to get overly technical, but we were recording the worst possible signal, basically what the streaming audio that we were sending out. And now we're actually recording directly from the mixing board, so the final copy of the podcast is unfortunately a larger file size, but it's much higher quality. And thanks to an anonymous donation, we're going to have a digital telephone hybrid device added to the mix, probably by the next show, so that we'll actually be able to have telephone guests and co-hosts on. So look forward to some announcements about some special guests on that show in the future. In addition to the programs and the meetings and the lectures, the ACA also does a number of social events throughout the week, including Atheist Happy Hour at Dog and Duck Pub, located at the corner of 17th and Guadalupe. We're on Guadalupe a lot. I think it's because that Scientology Reading Center is also on Guadalupe. I'm going to organize a field trip down there so we can all get tested with little tin cans that test our galvanic skin response, and we'll go into Scientology again later. Laugh. After this program, the cast are get together. We normally go out to eat. We're currently going to IHOP near I-35 and Cesar Chavez. The show's over at 4:30, and we'll be down there starting at 5. We've got the room from 5 to 7. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. You don't have to be a member to attend. You don't have to be a member to attend any of our regular events. But if you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. We'll have the number up for you shortly, and you can call in and explain what you believe and why, or why you think we're wrong, or why you think you're right, or call in and congratulate us on having a show after a couple weeks off, whatever you want. The other events that we've got going on are Wednesday night events for members. Last week we went and played board and card games along with CFI at Thor's Hammer. This week we'll be going bowling at, it's 300 Austin. And the following week we'll be playing pool again over at Side Pocket on Lamar. And I'll have more information about that next week, assuming we're on the air. But I'm betting we are. I think we're done with our preemptions. It's been crazy. That's it for the announcements, by the way. We'll turn it over to Tracie. But it's been crazy because we didn't get a chance to tell anybody ahead of time. So 3 weeks ago, we were on the air, and my last thing was, bye, we'll see you all next week. And then the Thursday of that week, we find out, well, we're completely revamping the studio, so you won't be on. And then the next week rolls around, and we're getting ready to come back on. And they said, yeah, we're not quite done with the studio, so you won't be on. So we appreciate everybody for hanging in. We'll have the number up for you shortly, but let's go ahead and continue with some notions on consciousness.
Okay. Let's see. The first part of this had to do with, I guess, neuroscience and neuroscience definitions and testing and how they view consciousness from a more scientific perspective. And then the second part of this, we dealt with how that translates into religion and how religion looks at consciousness, and we hit on different religious views of it, and talked about Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, and I think Christian and Muslim a little bit. Most of those lean toward a concept of consciousness which includes not just an awareness but sort of a sense of self, so that you've got what we would mostly think of as an ego. And this week, what I wanted to get to was there's something called ego death, which is sort of mostly embodied in Buddhism as they try to sort of meditate to a notion that you want to cease your thoughts and the idea that they want to cease to be.
Right. We talked about that a little bit last time.
Yeah, we did. And so the other thing, though, is that there's a whole other culture that deals with ego death, and that is a drug culture. And drugs have a long-standing history at being incorporated into religion, and we have religions in this country that incorporate drug use.
There's one that just went before the Supreme Court last year or the year before to allow them to use hallucinogens when they're in their ceremonies.
Right. I mean, and the Native American Indians have used drugs and been allowed to use drugs in their religion for a very long time. Drug use in other cultures and other continents in regard to religion are also very common. And part of that, the way that translated from our discussion on consciousness was that we understand that there are different levels of conscious awareness, that you have your waking conscious awareness, you have dreaming conscious awareness, where you're aware of stuff that's going on, but it's not what's happening outside you. It's sort of all in your head. So when you're asleep, you are conscious. I mean, you're seeing things, you're doing things, you're talking to people, but none of it is actually happening. It's just sort of a consciousness of your inner mind. And then you have like a lack of consciousness. We talked about that there's a lack of consciousness with regard to certain aspects of your brain function, that your brain is doing things all the time that you're not even aware of or that you don't think of or consider, you know, regulating your liver function and, you know, things like that. And then you have other levels of consciousness that people can get into with regard to things like hypnosis or meditation, where they may end up in a state that's between, I would say, I would just, for a broad brushstroke, call it sort of between a waking awareness and dreaming and sleeping and being completely unconscious. And I think it was me and Ashley that did the show on lucid dreaming, where you have your conscious awareness within the dream. You're aware that you're asleep, you're aware that you're in bed, and yet you're functioning within a dream. So there are some strange things that can occur with your consciousness. And we also understand that you've got people in this world who suffer from mental illnesses as a result of chemical imbalances in their brain, people that will hear voices or see things and suffer from hallucinations that can be helped with drugs that help them balance those chemicals in their brain so that they can lead, you know, and function more normally. And in the same way, if you have normal brain chemistry, you can change that by taking certain drugs that will affect your brain chemistry. and make you experience a conscious level that you normally don't experience, that's a little bit different than what you're normally seeing in reality. We know that someone takes a hallucinogen. Sometimes they might talk to people that aren't there, or try to grab something that isn't there, or they come out of the experience and don't even know what occurred when they were in the room right there the whole time, or they're watching television, they don't know what's on TV, or maybe they think the TV is talking to them. It's very similar to a psychotic episode in some instances. And at the same time, when these people do this, sometimes the experience is extremely frightening to them and extremely negative, and then some other times the people are very excited about the experience and they feel that it was beneficial to them. And when this occurs, they often want to express that to other people and describe the experience and describe what they consider to be an epiphany. And some of the language that they use ends up being very similar to language that's used in describing the religious experience, even the religious experience that's not involving drugs.
Right.
Part of the reason for this I'm going to put forward is because I believe we lack right now the common vocabulary to describe these brain states and brain functions. Things occur with people that, because we have just started delving into this scientifically, there is no vocabulary for it.
Right.
So you end up with very disjointed or very poetic language to explain an experience that the person themselves doesn't really understand. And sometimes they take it at face value. Sometimes they'll have an experience like this and they'll think, instead of saying, it was just like I got up out of my body and walked through a wall into the next room, they will say, I got up out of my body and I walked through a wall into the next room. There are
or worse, they'll even extend it to adding things like, my soul left my body and moved through. I mean,
I'm saying the level of, there's a level of interpretation where the person will either accept that what occurred was a brain shift, like a shift in their consciousness,
right,
or the person will believe that it was a literal occurrence, or they will ascribe some mystic explanation. And that's sort of up to them what they want to believe about what they experience. But the fact is that when people are around them, nobody saw them get up and walk through a wall.
Right.
So it's just sort of it appears to be something that occurs within your head that you then can either take at face value, or you can say this is something that obviously occurred within my head, regardless of how real it seemed to be to me. With that in mind, I want to sort of start with where we ended last time and just talk about a little bit. This was pulled off of an article that dealt with ego death and the psychoactive experience in general. And it said, this was the quotes that I felt were most significant. The effects become more powerful and may additionally include reports of perceptions of dimensional distortion, hearing voices, significant open and closed eye visuals, which is visual hallucinations, reports of experiencing alternate realities, out-of-body experiences, visiting parallel universes, as well as perceived contact with beings or entities, dissolution of one's ego, and life-changing experiences. Many feel compelled to communicate the details of their experiences to a wider audience, as evidenced by the numerous reports posted on the internet on various websites and forums, as well as first-hand phenomenological accounts. Some may go on to write more extensive prose and or poetry. And that was the end of that quote. The dissolution of the self, this is my notes, or the consciousness-related experiences that are undeniably related to the religious experience are heavily recorded among those who engage in experimentation with psychoactive drugs and plants. And then I've got a list of self-described experiences. These are from different people who went online and said, I have to tell you what just happened to me. And all of these people took the same drug. And I'm not going to get into what that drug is. I'll just say that it's legal. And it is apparently quite powerful. And there are laws currently being enacted against it. But right now, these are descriptions of ego death and how spiritual or poetic language comes into play when an experience is so beyond the ordinary perception that we can't describe it adequately on normal terms. And much of it is paradoxical, which I think Matt pointed out last week when someone said something about I experienced that I didn't exist anymore. And you were saying that it's so paradoxical that a person would use I, because obviously the experience was something they experienced, and yet the experience to them was that they didn't exist.
Yeah, and we've had similar types of contradictions when you say, my mind left my body, or my spirit left my body. I mean, you're still talking at it as kind of a third person of both of them.
Right.
And that we talked about the, where do you draw the separation lines between, the physical and the consciousness.
And I think that those problems and those paradoxes occur because the person simply lacks the vocabulary that's required to explain whatever it is they're trying to explain. Because
there's a level of understanding that technically all of us are lacking, because this is so new and so not well understood. We don't have a good vocabulary anywhere. I mean, I'm sure perhaps among professionals and medical professionals and psychiatrists, there's a language in there that they can use that is clear to them. But the average person on the street's never going to go around, doing medical jargon to explain. I was having this thing, and I entered a sub-state of consciousness at level 4. It's not going to happen.
Right.
We need those others, and we use other language shortcuts like that elsewhere. But the difference kind of comes with how well understood things are. When we use language shortcuts, for feelings and emotions, love is a very complex brain state that we don't understand yet. We can, or don't completely understand, but we can identify it. It's kind of one of those things where you know it when you see it, and it's become such a ubiquitous experience that we've developed a language, in fact, that we don't even really question very much. When you say that, oh, look at those two, they're in love. And everybody else around you, will probably agree. Okay, they're in love. But how do we know that? We can't know what's in either one of their minds. So we use language shortcuts to express complex things, and it's only a problem when what we're expressing isn't well understood among everybody in the discussions.
Right, and especially like I think what you're getting at is in these cases, if you haven't been exposed to a drug like this, or if you haven't ever had cause to, I guess you could experience something like this if you took a major blow to the head, or, if you haven't had that experience, it's very hard to relate to. I imagine it would be somewhat like either coming back from war or something akin to that, where the people that you're talking to have no idea what you just experienced, because no one around you shares that experience with you, and that's a rare thing. Most of the people that you interact with during the day have extremely high amounts of shared experiences. It's very rare that you're going to have something about yourself that is so significantly different than other people that you can barely even communicate it to them in any way.
We're really quite similar.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just going to read a list of these descriptions, and I think, you can point it out if you think it's not clear, but I feel that these are either, number one, describing in clear terms ego death, which I was most wanting to get at, because ego does seem to be the conscious view, the view of consciousness put forward by most religions. And I also think that a lot of the wording is very religious in nature, that just getting away from ego death, just the description of what the person experiences using drugs was very much like what people experience when they describe when they talk about their religious experiences. I think you'll see the parallels.
See, I had a hard time grasping this notion of ego death in the first place. And we talked about a little bit about 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, whenever you were last on. First of all, I don't know why one would want to. This seems to be kind of a goal of reaching non-existence in some form. And we talked about the contradiction of saying, I felt as if I no longer exist. But having never had the experience, even knowing what you mean when you say ego death and having talked about this, I still have difficulty kind of coming to terms with the concept, because it's not anything that I've ever experienced. It's not anything that I don't think I would want to experience.
I don't know if this helps or not, but like from the Buddhist perspective, the whole point of that philosophy is to help people cope with suffering or inevitable negative experiences. And one of the main things that it looks at as a frightening thing to people is death. So what that religion is trying to do, I think, is help people to come to terms with the idea that a point will arrive when you don't exist anymore and you don't have to be afraid of it. I think that's what they're getting at. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, and if I can get you to look at that as something that is simply, if you can in your life have moments where you feel as if your ego was dissolved to a certain degree, that maybe the idea that my ego stops at some point when I die will not be as frightening to you. since death is so frightening to so many people. I think it's just an attempt to come to terms with a thing that scares a lot of people.
I can understand that approach. Like I said, I haven't ever had the experience, and I don't have any real fear of death anymore. It's nothing I have any control over for the most part, or I have very limited control over when I'm likely to die.
Right.
And once I am dead, I'm pretty much convinced that, well, that's the end, so I won't be worried about anything afterwards.
Right. Was it Eusebius, or there was a philosopher that made a statement like that when we die, it was sort of like, when we're alive, we worry about death, but we're not dead, so there's no reason to worry about it. And when we die, we're not alive, and so we can't worry about it. So it's like death shouldn't really be
it becomes kind of a non-issue. Yeah.
Right. And but anyway, that's where I think with Buddhism, that's always kind of, I guess, the way to look at it is in what way would this help people to feel less stressed or feel less harmed by just the normal things that frighten most people in their lives.
So I've been holding you up. You can get to your quotes.
I think that the entry information is important. And if you didn't understand something, there's a good likelihood that a lot of other people had questions about it, and so it's good to talk about it. All right, here are some of the experiences. I was in a void. Everything was blackness. Nothing existed. Nothing. My mind was racing to make sense of it. I just knew that this was the end of everything. I was the only thing there. I was all of existence looking out into the void that was an absence of me. I felt incredibly peaceful afterward, as if something had been resolved. And that's really ambiguous, but it's just, yeah, that sense of peace.
Nothing existed.
Right.
But you're there observing this nothing existing. And at the end, you felt that something had been resolved, but you don't know what it was.
Right, but it's very ambiguous. And yet still there's this sense they describe as peaceful. Well, but in their mind, they have they're not saying that something was resolved. They're saying they had a sense that something had been resolved. And nobody really knows what these symbols, and that's the other thing, it's so highly symbolic that you can't know what it is that the person is, like what it is in their waking life that makes them choose these specific symbols. And when they interact with a certain symbol, it might be something that frightened them before, that after they interacted in this kind of euphoric drug experience with the thing, maybe afterwards they're like, wow, I'm not afraid of that anymore. You know, you don't know what else is possibly going on with the person's life to make them feel that something significant occurred here. It's hard to,
I mean, obviously I can't speak to experiences that I haven't had, apart from to say that, you know, like for example, when we've talked about this even recently, when somebody tells me they've had such and such experience and this is why they believe in God, that's fine. You know, if that was convincing for you, I can understand why you're convinced, but it's no reason. There's no reason that your personal experience should convince anyone else.
Right.
And I don't doubt that you had some experience that you're perhaps attributing to a God or whatever. I just doubt your attribution.
Right.
That there's any justification. You know, we talked, and I'll probably hit on that more with the UFOs.
But like with this person, for example, let's say that this is a person who was about to experience loss or had just experienced loss in their life. Someone close to them died or left. And then they have this experience where everything just goes void and they're comfortable with that. And then they come out of it, the drug wears off, and they say, you know, I experienced the loss of everything and I was okay. And that's how they might interpret that. So it makes the person feel better. Now someone else might take that same drug, have that same symbolism about the loss in their life, and then find it extremely terrifying, come out of it and say, I will never take that drug again because that was horrifying. It was like my worst fears, you know, right in my face, and I don't ever want to do that again. So and that's true too. I mean, I don't think I included any in here that were negative experiences because I was going for the religious experience, which is almost always a positive experience. Right. But there are negative experiences they're almost parallel to these, except the person's reaction was, this was horrible. The next one says, the sense I had was that I, or that part of me that exists outside the structure of my brain, was being injected into other people's brains. There was a Rolodex of brains available, people of vastly different realities, and as the Rolodex flipped, I jumped into and out of their neural structures. Each was very different, some were altogether foreign. There is only one that really persisted in my memory, and that was the brain of a housewife who had I'll say a crap load of cleaning to do. I was intensely relieved to jump out of that brain. So here's a person's experience where they just felt like they were literally just being other people, like in a association sort of way, like coming through, I guess, common experiences with people that were not them. That was what they thought was happening to them, or how they felt was happening. And that idea of remotely, let's say remotely, what would you call it? Like sending your ego out into a remote way.
It's being John Malkovich.
There you go. But it's a religious experience. People will say, you know, that they were somewhere else, or that I was able to. Astral projection I consider to be kind of a mystical claim. You might not call it a religious claim, I don't know, but I would call it almost a religious claim. And this is kind of getting close to what that would be for someone to say, I took this drug and then I was in someone else's mind. You know, and you could interpret that, or if a person wanted to, they could interpret that as literal and say, I did this, and these are real people, but, you know, this person is just saying, this is what happened to me. You know, and they're not claiming, I don't think that it's true, or that they actually were with actual people's brains, but just simply saying, this is what, I saw all these brains and was jumping in and out of them.
Yeah. I was going to take the one call that was on there, but
yeah, that would have been.
He hung up.
Okay, the next one says.
It's a shame, he was on topic too.
The next one says, I had an experience of my head merging with the wall and my chi going out through the back of my head and into the wall, at which point I felt and saw the wall's consciousness, like many interconnected geometric shapes of an Escher tessellation, and they seemed happy I was joining them. I felt the wonder and beauty of everyday reality, a wonderfully beautiful and complex illusion, which is also a highly religious language. We talked about the illusion in Hindu, and also to a certain extent in Buddhism and Taoism, the idea that reality isn't quite what we experience is their view of it. And that's what this person is saying, that it was a complex illusion. You know, I don't think it's a coincidence that he's referring to it in language that is a lot like some religions refer to it. And also the beauty of everyday reality starts to hit on, the wonder and beauty of everyday reality starts to hit on that idea that, you know, all of creation evidence is God, that there's something special about the whole thing, that
right.
This mug and the grass and, you know, everything is...
It also hits on the kind of New Age idea that you can be one with the universe and experience everything,
right.
and we're all interconnected.
Which is not unlike
how
some
often
old age religions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except now that they're using quantum physics buzzwords to make it sound more science-y.
Yeah. Or in the case of this guy, he's just trying his best to describe that his head was part of a wall and the wall was happy.
Yeah.
I mean,
happy wall.
This person says, I remember my body feeling like it was being evaporated. I had utterly and completely forgotten my existence.
Now hang on. This is important, and I'm sorry to laugh right off the bat. But he says, I remember my body feeling like it was being evaporated.
Correct.
Now, first of all, how do you know what being evaporated feels like?
He's reaching.
So it's this imagination that you're using, and you're coming up with the best description that you can.
Right, poetic
There's
language.
definitely, and that's kind of the point I was getting to, is that there's definitely this kind of broad brushed imagination poetry that you see in religions.
Right.
When you take a look at like I'm gonna forget it, but Daniel, the interpretations of dreams and things, and other visions. Who was it that they're saying now actually saw flying saucers? I can't remember.
Oh, Ezekiel?
Yes.
In the wheel, yeah.
Yes. That it was a big Ezekiel's wheel was a big flying saucer.
Right.
And it to me, I'm amused that that's the new spin on it, or a possible spin on it. But it shows what you're talking about.
Right.
That there's a common language among these kind of imaginative experiences for which we don't have good language. So.
Right. Yeah, that idea. Well, people will say, like, you know, I felt like I was, I mean, look at the Catholic statues of the ecstasies. You know, just people having these ecstatic experiences and describing, you know, seeing the angels and interacting with beings and feeling like they were taken someplace else. And I mean, it's very similar. Anyway, he says, I remember my body feeling like it was being evaporated. I had utterly and completely forgotten my existence. I had total ego destruction. I thought I had died. I couldn't feel my heart beating or my breathing. I didn't know if my eyes were open or shut. I mean, this is just complete conscious breakdown. I mean, this person is obviously experiencing a state that they are completely unable to relate. I mean, there's just you can't relate to that on any level as a person in waking consciousness trying to read this and relate to it. It's just outside of, it doesn't even, it's like you said before, it's such a paradox, it doesn't even make sense, you know? And yet the person's trying very hard to say what happened to them.
Yeah, I experienced something, and here's the best possible way I can describe it.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, you might as well be...
But and the other thing, though, that's important is like what you were about to say, I'm going to take a guess, is, you know, you might as well, it's like what good does it do to describe it in terms no one can understand?
Right.
Well, that's part of the point here, is this compulsion to express it.
Right.
Because that's also religious. And the next person says, it felt like I had been forcibly ejected from my body and I lost all sense of individuality. I felt like I was everything. The trees, the sky, the stars. I was just staring at the sky. It was like a swirling fireworks show that had a deep meaning and only I understood. It all made a strange kind of sense, as if what I was seeing was the truth behind a world that itself was a hallucination. It was an amazing experience. It didn't just change my perceptions, it was like it actually changed reality. Everything I saw was so real. And this is important because, to me, this is one of the more religious ones, where he says that you know, he became all these things, like you were talking about bonding, the oneness, you know, it's all one, God is one. And also that he got deep meaning that only he understood. He felt that there was a deep meaning that only he understood. And that's something that you see a lot in religion as well, that there's this personal revelation or this personal God, that you have a personal relationship, that, you know, you have this understanding, this personal understanding with God. And to him it made a, quote, strange kind of sense. And how many times have we heard that in discussions with apologists, that this is a logic that's beyond logic.
Yep.
As if I was seeing truth behind a world that was a hallucination, which again, we're back to the illusion reality of, you know, the older religions. And he was amazed by the experience and felt very happy about it when he came down off of this. The next one says, I found myself suddenly not me and no longer in my familiar candlelit room. In fact, thinking back on it now, my impression is that I was on a bench in a British train station and I was confused as to what I should be doing. I was transported to another place, not a physical place, but somewhere deeper, or rather maybe higher up inside that dark space that is who we are at times when we are at least our physical selves, such as lying comfortably in bed and close to sleep. Which, that to me is the one part that actually comes close to being understandable. That sort of pre-dream state where you're just sort of out of it, not quite awake, not quite asleep, and you're having weird, you know, visions or thoughts that are more visual than they would be in your waking reality. And I think that's very good of this person to recognize that it's a lot like this weird conscious state that you experience when you're about to fall asleep.
It's not the normal state of consciousness.
Right. But this, too, has a lot of religious language in it, in that he was transported to another place. It wasn't a physical place, which is huge in religion, that there are places that are not physical places, that we have these metaphysical realms and you know, these other dimensions where heaven is. That's why you can't see heaven with a telescope, because, you know, it's like a different kind of place. It's not like what we think of as physical locations.
Although there are some who think that heaven and hell are physical locations that are just, you know, obscured from us.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
or
I'm not
a different
gonna argue
type
with that.
of physical.
I would say that, yeah, I was going to say, I would think that most people would consider it a spiritual realm that your soul will discern once you're dead, and that not necessarily, I mean, there are some Christian, like Jehovah's Witnesses, believe that when you come back physically. But I think a lot of Christians believe that the resurrection entails more of a spiritual resurrection with spiritual realms, and at that point you'll go to like the sort of heaven that spirits reside in, and you couldn't reside in it like in your physical body, except I guess there were people in the Old Testament that were taken up.
Well, we have to be careful about, you know, ordinarily, you know, when we touch on different Christian beliefs, we're both from Christian backgrounds, we try and be as fair as possible and not, you know, say, I don't want to define what a true Christian is, but fortunately that work's been done for us by the Pope a week or so ago. The Pope came out with an announcement basically overturning Vatican II, stating that Christian denominations outside the Roman Catholic Church were not full churches of Jesus Christ. Right. So the Pope thankfully has defined away most of the Christians in the world. Protestants, Baptists, Methodists, Lutherans, Pentecostals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons.
Except that it's meaningless because all of them think he doesn't have the authority to do that.
Oh, but they're wrong. Because, you know, that's the holy church that God established himself. Which reminds me of this one Christian apologist who was a Baptist. I saw the quote, I think on Fundy Say the Darndest Things, who said that Catholics and all Protestants other than Baptists are all false churches. Baptists, according to her, were the original church, and her proof of it was because John the Baptist baptized Jesus. That's all proof. She says she has this idea that Baptists have always existed.
Who is this?
I don't know.
No, I mean, they emailed you or?
No, it's on Fundy Say the Darndest Things.
Oh, wow.
They pull quotes from different forums around the internet with religious fundamentalists saying silly things. Like, you can't get enough silly stuff, you know, on our show.
Yeah, that's true. And speaking of more silly stuff,
Uh-oh.
I'm blanking out. I'm blanking out the name of this drug because I don't want anybody to accuse me of encouraging people to take this. Since
All right,
it is
you can tell me afterwards.
It is available. It is legal, and I don't want people running out and trying it after hearing me talk about this. And I will just also express that despite the fact that these are positive, a lot of people do this drug and have negative experiences. So keep that in mind before you try any hallucinogenic drug, legal or otherwise. Anyway, they said, but I do know that this drug is meant for opening up the mind to things we do not see in reality. It will surely shed light on many things unseen by the human eyes, ears, and mind. Now, how many times have you heard that from an apologist regarding
this week?
His religion? Oh, there you go. It's religious language again, that there are things we don't see in reality, and that if you just, you know, he's saying if you take this drug, but to the apologist, it's if you follow this religion, if you believe in my God, you will experience all these things that, you know, you'll know then that this is real.
And for anybody who thinks I'm exaggerating when I said this week, if you go to ironchariots.org, which is a wiki that Russell Glasser and I and several other people in the nonprofit show have put together, and we're constantly working on, there's a forum there. You can just go www.ironchariots.org. There's a form that you'll have to register to get in. But over the past couple of weeks, we've had a conversation with a guy there, and I won't give out his name, even though you can go read it there. And his argument is, I can't prove God exists to any of you, but I know it and I've seen it myself. And I tried desperately by starting with very clear definitions of reality, truth, belief, all these things he agrees to, and then as soon as we get to how we're going to go about defining reality using these methods, he says, oh, but there's a spiritual reality that if you were just open to, you could experience. As long as you're open to the spiritual reality, then you're presented with some evidence for the spiritual reality, and if you're not open to it, then you're not. And how convenient. But it's the exact same thing this person's saying. If you take this drug, it'll open your eyes to these things that are real that you don't know are real.
And I do agree that for most people, if they take this drug, they're going to experience things beyond what they experience in reality.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I would describe it as that being reality. I would say that I would say that it's reality in the sense that it's always been in your head, but now you're accessing it. As opposed
it's
to
unreal.
Yeah.
It's experiential at best.
Yeah, it's
which
just
is one
a
of the
brain
things.
state.
You know, I have no problem with what these people are saying or anything else. For one thing to remember is that they're on a drug.
Right. Yeah,
they have
absolutely. They have
intentionally altered their brain chemistry, but nobody. Let's assume this guy is correct in what he's saying. There's no justification to say, I experienced this in a mind-altered state, and therefore it is real. You know, that it actually is there and exists.
And to more people, they'll say it's more real than reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, everything felt better. I was so, you know, all my senses were more heightened, and I experienced things. I could taste colors, you know, things like that.
And I mean, I don't doubt that this was happening to them. I'm making the point, I guess, that interpretation is what it ultimately matters.
Right.
It's how you interpret it. And I had a friend that used to say, I didn't agree with it wholly, but the point was, I think he was quoting somebody, and it was, data is neutral, interpretation is final. And the point being that you have data, and what a person makes of it is what a person makes of it. And whether it's rational or irrational is sort of irrelevant to the point that they see it how they see it. And we see that every day, that it doesn't really matter if it's rational. If I choose to say this is more real than reality and this is what's real, I no one's going to convince you otherwise, you know, until you're willing to accept, you know, other forms of evidence that go beyond your brain chemistry. You know, I don't know what else to say about it. This person says, remember that hideous concoction in grade school which was Jell-O and some random celery bits suspended in it? That's suddenly what the world seemed like. And my consciousness was a point on the end of a stick poking up in it as through a gooey popsicle. As I turned slightly left and right, the rubber goo of space around me and everything in it was pliable and stretchy. I felt if I had turned quick or far enough, I could have spun right out of it like a spoon twisting out of warm, malleable caramel. I didn't feel fear, but rather a woohoo, this is interesting sort of sensation. I know now that I'm really a popsicle stick.
So, you know what? You are. If you have a hallucinogenic experience and after it's over you're convinced and you know now that you're a popsicle stick, you are. Most definitely. And a doorknob. You're a doorknob and a popsicle stick.
Let's see. The next one says, I was finding out that I was able to live without my body and felt just free. I shouted, expressing my happiness. Feel free. Your body is not real. Then I cannot understand, but I had the vital necessity, and this is a foreign person, I should mention, so the language is a little bit strange. Then I cannot understand, but I had the vital necessity to look behind me. And this is all in caps, this next question. I was sure I was going to find out the truth of everything, question mark, question mark, question mark. And then she goes back to normal case. It is very difficult to explain. I remember I cried. I felt happy because I understood there is something else. For me, is strange saying this. I am not religious. I don't know, another reality not in this time, neither this space, a dimensional. I'm writing this because I would like to know more about this. I would like to know if my experience is like other people's experience, feeling scared, then free and happy. The need to look behind me to see the, and she puts like an ellipsis and says light, question mark, but I don't want you to think I'm mad. So here's a person that, number one, understands that she had an experience that sounds crazy when she tries to express it. And number two, she explains why she's sharing it, which is, I want to know if anybody else has had this experience.
And see, that's what drives me crazy. Is it doesn't matter if anybody else had that experience. You guys were on drugs. Yes. Don't translate your hallucinations to reality.
Right.
Just, you know, hey, you had a good time. You saw some strange stuff. You felt weird. But, you know, unless what you've discovered, you know, and I'm not saying that you can't learn anything, or because there's an access to consciousness, kind of in a self-reflective way, where you may be able to learn things that you're not, or come to an understanding of some things that you're not going to be able to do, or haven't been able to do at that point through other means. That may happen, but whatever you've discovered needs to actually be demonstrable in reality. You can't go off and take your wacky drug and discover that we're all one and not be able to describe it and then come out of reality and claim that it's an epiphany. It wasn't an epiphany. It was a trip. You know, you can learn things potentially from anything you do, but what you've discovered it has to demonstrably be reality.
Right. There's a huge difference between saying, wow, I felt like my consciousness dissolved.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to wonder what it is I mean when I say I. That's a very different statement than saying, you know, my consciousness dissolved and so now I know that I don't exist. And, you know, it's like, no, you don't know anything. You experienced a different perspective.
Right.
It doesn't matter if that perspective was the result of a delusional belief, or if it was the result of taking a mind-altering chemical, or if it was the result of your brain malfunctioning and firing altering chemicals. Right. Or if it just comes from talking to someone who views the world in a very different way and hearing their explanation of their perspective, to where you say, I've never thought of it like that before, and now I have access to this other perspective.
Something about my mind has changed.
Right.
You know, not necessarily chemical. It could be...
The change of perspective, I think, is what most of these people that are happy with the experience are elated with. I think they're coming to grips with maybe seeing a view that they hadn't seen before, and that that's what's most impressive to them.
And that ties into the common experience and language thing. It doesn't matter, I mean, as you were saying, that whether or not this happens on drugs or not is irrelevant to some degree. When we have an experience, if we don't have the language to describe it, we tend to use the language that is most similar and most readily available. So, for example, when you're standing in church and everybody's singing and you get goosebumps, you're likely, if you're a Christian or a particular group of Christians or non-Christians, if you're the Pope, you're probably going to describe that feeling, that kind of rapturous goosebump type thing, as the Holy Spirit, because that's the language that's been given to you to best describe that. And we may not have better language outside of that for other things, but if you can experience that same feeling or similar feelings in other areas, whether it be listening to secular music or going to an opera or being moved by a movie, a motion picture, a film or whatever, or during sex, I mean, those are all they're similar experiences that your brain goes through. They're not identical, but the fact that they're not identical doesn't necessarily mean that one is all of a sudden from a god. They're experiences that your brain goes through, and coming up with the explanation for them is what we try to do. And if you're religious, you tend to use religious language to describe those. Oh, I really felt the touch of the hand of God, or the Holy Spirit moved through me, or any number of other things. And if you're not religious, and maybe in the drug world, you may use slightly altered language. I felt that my entire body felt like it was in Jell-O, and I'm really a popsicle stick. It's the failings of having good language, which is what you've been saying over and over again, and our likelihood to adopt the language of those around us.
Yeah.
The wise people who've been around longer than us, who when we're faced with a puzzle, come back with the kind of sage response of, well, that's the Holy Spirit, my son,
Well, with this, I was focusing on ego death, but I can honestly tell you that if I had wanted to, I could have pulled unlimited numbers of drug experiences that described interaction with a spirit being that came and wrapped them in love and made them feel good. Yeah, I mean, that just wasn't the focus of this, but there is a ton of that as well.
Let's take some calls real quick. We've got, is it Jay?
Okay. What's stronger?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Hold on.
What is stronger?
It's very quiet.
We're trying to adjust the volume.
Adjust the volume right now. So
Okay.
Okay.
All right. What is stronger? What you got? Your brain or your religion? Let's go back to World War II, concentration camps, and the Death March. There were people in that way that was quoted back after you saw some of the newsreels and after the whole conflict was over, and even just recently was a long article still on the news about those that had survived the Death March, where they had said they wanted to die, but the brain kept telling them, you've got to live. And then they said they would hear a voice speak to them by saying, you're not going to die. So most likely back there then, what was the combination? Were they religious? The religion that they had been brought up into put the spirit and the strength in them when they should be dead. Because if you watch the pictures of the actual march, it was amazing as those that did live. And so she was talking about an out-of-body experience. Some of them felt like they said they were floating. They didn't even know they were walking. They didn't even know they were being beaten.
Right.
They didn't feel it.
It's kind of a way of separating yourself to avoid the pain of what you're experiencing.
And that's what I'm saying. It had to be to where they get the strength to the brain, because actually, physically, they didn't have the strength, not after what they had gone through.
But this is, I mean, when you're talking about just the sheer physical, I would probably agree. This is, but we know this happens outside of religion as well. Religion may be one of many ways to kind of foster this way of separating yourself from reality. But we see it in other abuse victims as well.
Right.
Where, I'm just going to shut my eyes and imagine that I'm off in Happy Land to avoid dealing with the situation that's actually happening right now, where you're being beaten or molested or whatever else.
Right.
And it's a way of kind of retreating into one's own mind. And it does relate both to religious experience and to the drug experience we talked about.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because I know the same way when they go back, I don't remember what that old guy was. It was all this LSD garbage.
Timothy Leary?
Yeah. They hallucinated. Because I didn't have no way. I don't use drugs. I never will. Don't want to. My own mind controls me. And yes, but it's that way. But I mean, they came out. It was always saying out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, I think that goes. I think it's a great example of what Tracie was saying when we're talking about we know we didn't, on some level. Hopefully, most of us know that when something like that occurs, you didn't really leave your body, but out-of-body experience seems to be the best language to describe what you were experiencing at the time. Now, we've tested real claims of people who claim to be able to astral project or float above their bodies or whatever else. It fails miserably. There was a good example of you put them in a bed with a big tall dresser next to it, and you write some message on top of the dresser, have them lay there, and they can never ever read or even notice that anything was over there.
Yeah.
So
LaBarge did that in the dream experiments when he was doing lucid dreaming.
Right.
Some of the people, when they experience lucid dreaming, feel like they are astral projecting.
Yeah.
And so what they did, because what would happen is a lot of times in lucid dreaming, you lucid dream that you're in the environment you went to sleep in sometimes. And it's very real. Like I did it where I woke up and I thought I was getting ready for work, and then I realized I was not awake.
Yeah.
And so when this happens, what he started doing, because he wanted to test this as well, they put notes like on the monitors and things in the other rooms. And when someone said, I went into this other room, they would ask them, well, did you see this? Did you see that? What did you see? And when they would describe it, it inevitably failed. It was generally the other room, but as far as any of the cues that would have confirmed that they had actually seen, something that confirms that you were looking at that room because of something we put there, they could never do it.
Yeah, and a lot of that, there's kind of this, I've talked before about how we depend on our senses in order to give us experiential data about the world. And it's the independent confirmation of the senses that goes to build our worldview. So, when I see something, I have some information about it, and I can get really good information from sight, but as I add touch, smell, taste, hearing to those as well, I get more information. But our brain doesn't really, it knows when I'm seeing something, but when it's building its model of reality based on all of its sensory data, it does kind of this convergence thing. So, for example, when you're unconscious on the hospital table, which is where a lot of these kind of pseudo near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences occur, you're in an altered state of consciousness already, whether it's because you're near death or because they've pumped you full of drugs. Your eyes are closed, but you can still hear. We can't shut our ears the way we can shut our eyes. So, and if you've lived a decent amount of time, you're pretty good at building a model of reality around you just from hearing. You can kind of hear people moving, tell how many people are in the room, what's going on, and other things, and your brain will build a pseudo model of the world based just on whatever data it's getting from your hearing. Right. So you can, and as voices fade away and there's some distortion in your brain about where the source of these signals are, you can completely feel that you're somewhere up above your body hearing down instead of hearing up or from laying on the table. So.
And who hasn't had the experience of waking up from a dream state where the one I remember specifically was hearing a voice, like a very scary voice, and waking up and it's like, oh, it's just the washing machine. It's like it starts to translate into reality as you awaken, and you realize that your brain is simply taking external data and then retranslating it into a dream.
And it may also be some situations where your brain actually does something wrong because maybe I'm crazy. I'll have conversations with myself on occasion about something, or my subconscious or whatever will, I don't hear an audible voice saying no, you shouldn't do that, but that's the way my brain looks at it. Right. It's very much the kind of looking at the duality of ourselves.
Tracie said she was dreaming about going to work.
Yes, I've dreamed.
All right, wait a minute, because normally you get up and you do go to work.
Correct.
Well, supposedly, I hope. Anyway, have you ever dreamt something, say maybe 2 or 3 months, and then later it happens to identical of what you have dreamed?
I wouldn't say identical, but I have had dreams before where I would say that loosely interpreted, if I wanted to force them to fit reality, I could do so. Like I dreamt that, for example, a friend of mine was driving, let's say friend X was driving friend Y's car and the vehicle wrecked. Well, it wasn't, I was actually informed later that the friend that owned the car wrecked the car. Now, I could have been really freaked out by that and said, oh my God, I knew this without anybody telling me. But in reality, I mean, you know, no, I can't really say that that was, it certainly wouldn't have been a premonition because it would have already occurred.
Right.
But, you know, on the one hand, I'm thinking, is it possible that I heard in the background somewhere a conversation about this friend wrecking their car and then later dreamt it and then, you know, became more consciously aware of it when someone told me about it? Or is it just that I happened to dream that because he's my friend and I would see him all the time and I liked his car, that I dreamt about his car and, you know, my other friend wrecked it and that was the dream and then just so happened that he wrecked his car. I mean, I guess when I was in high school, I think I made something of it, and now as an adult, I look back and I think that it was wrong to have made something of it.
Possible. Not always. I don't know. Matt doesn't believe that way, you know, because I was going to ask him, have you dreamed something that's come true from?
Not that I know of. I don't have a very good
recall of dreams.
I don't have a very good recall of dreams.
Okay. I just wondered.
And that makes a difference, I think. The more you...
Yeah, because you're supposed to dream every night, according to the medical profession, up to some degree, or have to get into a
several times. You know, dreams can be very short or very long. It happens multiple times throughout REM sleep.
That's why they say your state of sleep is supposed to be each night.
And see, I have a lot of dream recall, so it makes sense that I would probably have more incidents that would align with reality because I remember having several dreams a night. So if I'm having several dreams a night over 40 years, that's a lot of dreams to coincide with reality.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. I've got to go on to some other callers. Appreciate it. That's kind of important too. Is that okay? So if perhaps I had a dream, and then it later turned out that the dream was somewhat accurate, partially accurate, maybe even completely accurate, what difference does it make? That's not proof that I knew the events were going to occur, or that somehow I was being directed to have that dream. I don't want to overplay coincidence, but it seems to me that people are underplaying it.
Right. I look at it.
Tonight, and we have this kind of commonality among human experiences. How many people do you know that have been in car wrecks?
Right, and especially high school students.
Yeah.
I mean, but to me, I look at it like that. Like it's almost like lotto. Someone's going to win, and when you have 20 million people playing, you're going to get some winners. And sometimes 4 or 5 people will win. Sometimes one person will win. Sometimes nobody will win. It rolls over. When you look at how many, there's what 6 billion something people on the planet, and all of them are having several dreams a night. If none of those dreams coincided with reality, that would be a miracle. You know, I mean, you're going to have some overlap, especially since a lot of people have dreams that are very realistic, that deal with very mundane issues.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if you took all the people that play the lottery regularly, all of them have had a dream that they've won the damn thing. So it shouldn't be surprising that the one person who does one also fits into the category of the people who had dreams. If we're going to say that was prophetic, then that one person whose dream came true is offset by the millions who had that dream and it didn't come true. I mean, statistics have got to work both ways. You cannot pick and choose and draw circles around, and say, look, it hit the target. It's sharpshooter fallacy. We've got, and I apologize, I'm not going to be able to pronounce your name. Is it Lorisse?
Yes, that's me.
How you doing?
Hello, just fine. You'll have to excuse me. I just tuned in just maybe about 5 minutes ago or so.
Okay.
So I'm not up to speed with what you guys are talking about, but I saw that the subject. Nice. I saw that the topic is, this is your brain on religion. And, well, first of all, I think both of you make very, very precise and very concise arguments as well for your case. I'm not really a smart person, so I can't say either way. But I would just like to talk about how I personally believe that because of religion, religious fervor, there's often in the mind of a human being this sort of deep-seated, insane belief that because human beings are, quote, smart, and because of technology and progress, and because of advancements, that we have a sort of right to have dominion over the entire planet, which is very, very false and has, you know, proven very disastrous in so many ways, you know. And I find it very, very odd that something that all claim to be so true and so right has given so many others a ticket to just exploit all the resources and materials that are on this planet for personal gain.
Yes, because God told them to.
Well, yes, very much so. I just find it odd. Now, of course, I'm not talking about, you know, the simple farmer that, you know, plants their seeds and grows their crops, you know, make a little money, but, you know, feeds their family. I mean, since the time of at least William Shakespeare, there's just, of course, in Western history is all I can talk about. There has, you know, been this money-grubbing, just lust, you know, for gold or jewels and you know, digging and mining of the earth, just for wealth, you know.
Yeah.
There's a great case to be made that you know, we are a virus on the planet that has exploded, and you know, that we have kind of ignored because technology has grown at such a rate that maybe our brains haven't grown responsible enough to make proper use of it.
Very much so,
and haven't taken into consideration the effects that we have. And I don't think you have to go to any extremes and say, you know, oh, you're killing Mother Earth, or look what you're doing to these animals, or anything else. No, even if you're just a selfish ass,
right?
Think about what you're doing for the future generations of humans. Even if you want to give humans dominions over the earth, think about what your actions will do for those, because they're not going to have any.
Right, and also with religion, planting into the minds of people that they have dominion over the earth is also that idea that human beings are the best creatures on the planet, you know, and the most intelligent, which, you know, I'm thinking is not necessarily true. Just a little example, and I'm not a scientist, so I can't say for sure, but there are those, I guess, octopus and squid in the ocean, for example, and they have this ability to camouflage themselves into their surroundings. And the thing is that requires, I'm thinking, a little bit of an intelligence. I saw this thing on Discovery Channel where they took a squid and they put his environment, it was a black and white checkered floor, and I guess the floor of the tank that the squid was in, and just in a matter of minutes, that squid was able to camouflage its skin. I mean, think about that.
It adjusts it to the size of the checkered grid too. It's not like it becomes squares.
Well, yes.
But yeah, I think there's a good case to be made about plenty of other intelligent animals. I have no problem at all saying that humans are, as far as we know, the most intelligent species on the planet. We may not be the smartest as far as when it comes to using the intelligence that we have, which is an entirely different thing. I did want to make one quick note, and I'll let you finish with whatever you have to say before we move on.
Thank you.
Because I keep forgetting. We've switched where we have dinner after the show, and we're going to IHOP at the corner of I-35 and Cesar Chavez.
Oh, very nice.
And any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. You're welcome to come down as well, but because we've got like 25 minutes left in the show and I hadn't said it yet, I wanted to get that in. But please continue with what you were saying.
Oh no, and I was just going to say that, and they've done, I guess, tests on it, or at least it's a common belief that, you know, the human being, you know, uses whatever 10%.
That's a myth.
You know, and it's just it's one of those things that makes you think, well, if that be the case, if there's only that 10% potential, you know, then how can you say for absolute certain that the human creature is the most intelligent creature when, you know, when in theory just with using that sort of number, 10%, then it's a 90% chance that you're wrong.
No, well,
yeah, you know, if
first
you're
of all,
only using 10% your whatever potential, and that's to operate all of your systems. That's for the breathing and the seeing and the touching and the thinking and all of that. I mean, if that figure is so true,
and it's not.
And tell me what the figure is, because that's what they say.
The common misclaim that humans only use 10% of their brain is a myth.
Oh yes, well please tell me the truth.
We use all of our brain, just like every other thing.
Okay. Well, no, thank you, because that's something I've been told, and of course I just swallowed it.
Everybody's been told it. I believed it for years. But we use all of our brain. Every part of our brain has different functions, and I think part of it came from trying to determine, which part is used for memory or which part is used for cognitive thought types things, and how much applies to it. But granted, we're the ones who created the scale for intelligence.
Yes.
Well,
so obviously we're going to be at the top. But the thing is, I think that you can make a good case that we've made a scale that is objective enough that if we met another species, they could potentially be more intelligent than us, and we would be able to identify that and know it.
Well, exactly. Oh, you said it so well. Well, thank you for your time. I think your show is great, and wish you well, both
Thanks.
of you. Enjoy
Please
your
feel free to come down to IHOP and visit with us. We'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.
Appreciate the call. I've got Russell.
Hi.
How you doing, man?
Pretty good. When you use that mind virus thing, you should really switch to your Agent Smith voice. We are the cure.
Sure.
Right. But the reason I called, I heard you talking earlier about sort of what's acceptable as evidence of the supernatural, as far as having dreams that come true. And this actually was very much like an argument I just got into with my dad. You may have seen that I put a blog post on atheistexperience.blogspot.com arguing with some guy in the Washington Post who had written a bunch of theological nonsense and ended with, these atheists wouldn't even believe in God if a squadron of angels showed up at their doorstep.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, that's a typical move. Make up some rock-solid evidence that doesn't actually exist, and then shift the focus to how atheists are so unreasonable that they wouldn't even accept that evidence, even though we haven't actually been put in that position because there is no such rock-solid evidence.
Yeah.
And I said, let me just say right now, if a squadron of angels shows up at my doorstep, I'll believe in them. My dad is different from me. He is what we sometimes call a Gnostic theist. He not only, or a Gnostic atheist, I should say, he not only doesn't believe in God, but he believes that there's pretty well nothing that could convince him that a God exists. And he said, well, I would just assume that they were a bunch of Hollywood actors put up by Pat Robertson.
Well, it would have to be more than things that looked like common descriptions of angels showing up at my doorstep. They would have to be some demonstration of power, something other than just, whatever they say. And
something to illustrate it wasn't just in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. And I listed for him a bunch of tests that you could presumably apply to the angels to find out that they're angels, and he said, well, see, you're falling into his trap, because he wants, he would expect you to say that as soon as the angels show up with no further proof needed, you would accept, or you wouldn't accept the existence of God from the angels, and so he's right.
Well, if he's saying that I wouldn't accept the existence of God if angels showed up at my doorstep, that there's a kind of an assumption there that I would know and have proof that they are angels.
Right.
There's a difference between a bunch of people showing up at my doorstep claiming to be angels and angels showing up at my doorstep. And I don't think it's fair to disregard the justification behind the label when you're making that argument.
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty convinced that if a bunch of angels actually showed up at my doorstep, they would have no trouble proving that they were angels to me.
Yeah, if God's got difficulty proving that he's God, yeah, there's a lot of questions to ask there.
Yeah.
If somebody showed up and appeared right here in the studio, and all of us, Tracie and I and the people sitting out there, could see him, and he just appeared out of nowhere, that's pretty good evidence for something. Now, I don't know
Well,
then you would
teleporters
have to
from
have
the
some
future is a good explanation.
What's that?
Teleporters from the future is one
Right.
explanation.
And that was my point, was that the next thing that would have to occur is we'd have to be able to communicate with this whoever appeared and find out what the hell they are, how they got here, and see if their explanation makes reasonable sense. And if they say that they're God, the fact that they just appeared in the room may or may not be enough. But, you know.
Right. Well, anyway.
Go ahead.
Have a good show.
Thanks, Russell.
All right, bye.
We got, I think it's John.
Yeah.
How you doing?
All right, man. By the way, you can't go backwards in time. You can only go forwards in time. That's what.
No, that's what you think. I don't think.
Well, that's what Genesis is all about. Why they kicked him out of the garden, and they got the satanic angels sitting at the gate, the cherubim. Anyway.
Hey, let me ask you about that. If nobody can get to the Garden of Eden, why does it need guards?
Garden of Eden is a metaphor, man.
Okay.
It's the earth. It's all the earth, east to Eden, everything. See, when they wrote the Bible, they didn't know that the world was round, and Abraham was given all the land of the east. But that's everything, because the world's round.
Gotcha.
If you go east, what you going to end up? You're going to end up right back where you are, right?
Well, yeah.
You can't go. Okay. My point is this, and I was trying to talk to your screener, and I don't know if I made myself, I don't know if I confused myself trying to explain to him what I was going to talk about, but it's the difference between objectivity and subjectivity. And I want to say I appreciate your show, and you know, I'm a spiritual seeking agnostic myself, but there seems to be a certain bias towards objectivity, at least on your part, Matt.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that right. You agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah,
what you personally experience is only valid to you.
Right.
Right.
You know, when we're talking about what is reality and among everything that's real, the only way we can have any kind of dialogue is to talk about the things that are real to both of us, and that is objective reality that's demonstrable. As a matter of fact, I'm of the opinion that anything that isn't in that, doesn't fit in that category, shouldn't be described as real. It's some kind of esoteric experience.
Right. Well, I'm exactly the opposite. I know where you're coming from, and I see what you mean, but I'm exactly the opposite. I believe that the subjective reality is the only truth, and that objectivity is a
so how do we coexist?
It's a demonic deception.
Objectivity is a demonic deception?
Right. Well, that's my personal belief. That's not a bad thing. We need demons, you know. And by the way, what's the difference between an angel, by definition, is an extraterrestrial. And you talk about angels showing up at your doorstep. What if it was a Holy Ghost flying saucer up in, you know, wheel in the sky like that Journey song? You know what I'm talking about?
I hear you. Did you have a point?
Look, I'm gonna be real for a second, okay?
Good.
The
Subjectively real?
Yeah, subjectively real or objectively real?
I'm not sure. I'll have to get back with you on that. The thing, there was a few weeks ago. I like to watch those. I'm not a faithful. I'm not always where I'm supposed to be at any given moment. But anyway, I appreciate the show, and I watch it when I'm home. You were talking about the story, the Genesis, the second and third, I believe, chapter of Genesis that has two different creation.
First and second, but yeah.
Is it the first and second?
Yeah.
Well, one being like the creation of man and woman, and the next one being the creation of Adam, right?
Right.
Is that basically your understanding of it as well?
They're a little different.
My understanding may not mesh with what you're talking about.
Well, don't worry about that, but it's basically one of them talks about God created man and woman, and then the next one talks about he created Adam.
Right.
Basically.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm more interested in where we agree than when we disagree. I think there's power in that. You know, the kingdom is agreement. When two or more people agree, that's the kingdom. Anyway, what my point is, you were saying that was a contradiction, and that higher intelligence couldn't, you know, in your mind, couldn't have written it, or probably didn't write it.
No.
I'm not right.
My take on the two different Genesis accounts is I don't care. And
here's man, come on now.
Hang on. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
Let me finish. I need to be fair. It's no longer a book that is relevant to me. I have no good reason to believe that any of it's true. I don't have any reason to believe that even in metaphor that it's accurate. So there are some Christians who say that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 have no contradiction because one is a further explanation of what happens in the other. There are others who realize that no, things are in a slightly different order, and this is probably two authors, and there may in fact be contradictions there. My position is, when I look at the text, I see things that don't agree, and I don't have an explanation for why they don't agree, nor do I accept other people's explanations for why they don't agree, and I don't care why they don't agree because I don't think that this is real or relevant or even important in a metaphoric sense.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to you not caring in a minute. But the point is, to me, I don't fit in either one of those categories. I don't think. I don't know. Of course, there are Christians who believe that it's like a frickin' science book. I want you to also acknowledge the fact that I didn't cuss right now, okay? Because I'm a cusser. I'm not cussing on your show, Matt. Okay. But the point is, some Christians don't. They see it as they're creationists and they're idiots. Okay, I'm not one of them either. The point is, to me, there's a fine line between contradiction and paradox, and there's a lot of value in paradox. And you can say, well, it doesn't have any metaphoric value. I don't know how you would make that kind of judgment. I mean, that's like saying Mark Twain has no relevance today, or how can you judge the value of a metaphor?
I thought you were a spiritual seeking agnostic who only believed in subjective reality.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Then why are you asking me for my opinion? My opinion should be completely irrelevant.
Well, why would you tell him that his subjective reality isn't valid?
How can you tell me that my subjective reality isn't valid?
The only thing I said was invalid was, and I didn't say invalid. I said, how can you judge a metaphor for its value?
Well, so you can do it subjectively, the same way you would do anything subjectively.
See, you're twisting my words, man. You're playing the Pharisaical game.
What is subjective? How do you define subjective?
Look, hey, what my subjective meaning, subjectivity is maybe different than yours because it's subjective meaning. Right. I made a very good point. And you told me you didn't care. Here you got a show about atheism. You got a show on television. You're talking to people about their faith and their religion and their lack of religion and what it means. And here you're going to tell me that you don't care?
Yes, I don't care what the book says until somebody demonstrates why I should care about what the book says. You can't.
Well, I'm not here to do that. I can't do that. I can only talk about my own experience.
Well, that's fine. But what I'm talking about is, when we talk about, for example, Christianity as a religion, somebody could call up and say, in the Bible, it says, John 3:16, that for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, and that's all the proof that you need, that Jesus was therefore divine and came directly from God. And I'm saying, no, just because the book says it doesn't make it true. I don't care about what's in the book at all until you demonstrate why I should lend any credence to the book. That's what I'm saying. When I say I don't care about the Genesis account, I'm saying you need to demonstrate, or whoever needs to demonstrate, that there's a good reason to care about what's in that book.
Well, you should care about everything, but you made my point.
When I say I don't care, I'm talking about lending credence to.
My original point is that, and you agreed with me, that you're biased towards objectivity and you minimize subjectivity. And subjectivity is a very important experience. It's part of being human.
I don't disagree that it's important to you individually. I'm talking about
all of us. That's how we communicate.
Yes, I was using the big U.
Oh.
I couldn't apply subjectivity to everyone as a group, but everyone as individuals. There's some significance there, but that's personal. What matters is how we deal the reality that we share, and how we work cooperatively in there, and the effects that we have, and the actions that we take to affect that reality. You can believe that naked pixies whisper in your ear and clean out your sink at night if you want to, but it has no bearing at all on the objective reality that we actually have to deal with. And that's where we make our decisions. Anybody who wants to believe anything, feel free. I'd prefer that they believed things for good reasons and that it was consistent with the reality that everyone experiences. But what we do based on beliefs is what's important. And what we do is certainly objective.
Well, okay, you're talking over my head now, Matt. So But, I forgive y'all for being all pharisaical and trying to twist my words with the subjectivity thing. And God bless y'all and have a good show.
Hey, I've been God blessed by a spirit-seeking agnostic. That was fun, John. Thanks. Next time we'll cut it a little shorter.
Honestly, though, I do wish he would have defined what he meant by subjective. I mean, if I twisted his words, then he was definitely using subjective in a unique subjective way.
He's got his own subjective definition.
But subjective means just whatever is your personal interpretation of something. And I thought it was very odd that when you started to talk about how you felt about what was in the Bible, he would say that that was, somehow not correct.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can you say that to somebody after you just said subjective reality is the only reality that matters?
I don't know.
Unless it's just your subjective reality is the only reality that matters. I don't know.
We've got, let's go on and take another call real quick. Is it Joe?
Hey.
Hello?
Hey.
You there?
Yeah,
Yes.
we're here.
I'm just reading Christopher Hitchens' book, and on page 52, by the way, have you done a review of this or anything yet?
I haven't actually read it yet.
Okay, anyway, page 53, back to the topic, brain and religion.
Right.
He makes the point that people who commit murder in the name of, God made me do it, go into court and get off on insanity. So the legal system recognizes that the brain can be twisted by religion for whatever that's worth.
I don't even think that they're making an assumption that religion twisted it. I think they're making a clear statement that if you hear voices from God, you're nuts.
Okay.
And even to say that you're only nuts if the voices tell you to hurt somebody, if the voices tell you that you're loved, then you're completely sane.
Well, who was the comedian that used to say the devil made me do it?
Flip Wilson.
These people are saying God made me do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a twist.
And actually, that ties together both the topic and the last call about subjective and objective reality.
Oh, okay. One more punch and I'll shut up. I didn't see you guys the front row in Stonewall looking for angels, and
was there like an angel?
The Catholic Church is paying $66 million, so Hail Mary and put something in the basket.
Yeah, forehead, testicles, wallet, and watch. That's
okay.
That's what it was. Oh, Joe hung up. Sorry, Joe. That call actually ties together both the topic and the previous caller talking about subjective and objective reality. And that's that we live in a world where, and I was talking about the actions that we take, they all deal with objective reality. But we have we have to be able to take actions. For example, if subjective reality is all that matters, if people's personal experiences are all fine and good, and they're their own and we shouldn't worry about it, then what justification do we have to lock anybody up in an asylum? What justification do we have to diagnose mental conditions, schizophrenia? What justification do we have to present these people with medication? How can we define normal at all? You can't have this subjective reality as all that matters, because you end up with basically an anarchy, just chaos. We live in a reality where, for the most part, we all tend to agree on what we observe. We may have different of opinions about how to deal with certain things, or what actions are justified, or what our own self-importance is. There's quite a bit of arrogance and quite a bit of us versus them. My tribe is superior, so it's okay for me to kill some other tribe. And those are the things that we're still fine-tuning and trying to learn in order to be a cooperative society. But there's some things that we agree on. And as Tracie was pointing out with regard to religious people, I don't think religious people should be locked up. But I will say, unreservedly, it's a delusion. Dawkins wasn't just creating a witty title when he called his book The God Delusion. It is most definitely a delusion. It may provide some positive benefits on occasion, but from the standpoint of objective reality, the belief that there is a God is a delusion. And I don't say that to be insulting, it's just a matter of fact. If it wasn't a delusion, then we would be able to identify it, observe it, measure it. And I'm not saying, oh, we're going to take out a tape measure and measure God. I'm talking about the scientific process by which we define reality, the interaction of not only the experiences of my different senses, but the confirmation between individuals. You know, if I hold this pen up and everybody says, I don't see a pen, obviously I'm going a little crazy. Obviously there's something wrong with my head and I'm hallucinating. Right. But if everybody else sees the same pen and we all agree on it, then we're off to a pretty good bet. Now, somebody earlier mentioned this thing about you can't prove absolutely, and I'll just, for the millionth time, I throw out the notion of absolute certainty completely. I disregard it. It's a red herring. It doesn't matter. Beliefs are measured in degrees of certainty, and I never reach an absolute. Outside of tautologies, I know that my name is Matt because I have been defined that particular way. Outside of definitional tautologies, I don't, and my own existence, which is another form of tautology, I don't know anything to an absolute degree of certainty. I don't believe anything to an absolute, and I don't prefer to deal in those terms. We talk about how certain I am about certain things. Well, I'm as certain that there's no God as I am that there's no fairies or pixies or leprechauns. Am I absolutely certain? No. But that doesn't matter. We don't live our lives that way. Are you absolutely certain that when you press your accelerator to pull out into traffic that your car is actually going to move at the rate that you anticipate that it does, and that you're not going to actually be T-boned and kill 15 people? No. But you sure do take actions based on that. And if that's okay, if that's justifiable, then drop this notion of absolute certainty and don't come and say, you can't absolutely prove that God doesn't exist, because first of all, I don't have the burden of proof. You do. If you think God exists, you have the burden of proof, period. Secondly, absolutes don't matter. We don't know, you know, I don't claim that evolution is absolutely true, but it's a fact. It's an observed fact. And the theory that we have that explains it, that involves natural selection, that compromises, includes common descent and these other things, those are theories that are so sound, we believe them to such a degree of certainty that it is patently absurd to think that they would be wrong. And it's insane to think that we should chuck those in favor of magic man done it. But that's today's rant.
Before you hit the next call, if you have time, I just want to say that in my response to subjective versus objective reality is that there have been many occasions when my subjective interpretation of something was wrong, and yet there have been far fewer occasions where I've found out that objective reality was wrong. I mean, there's been a lot of times when I interpreted something to be one way and then found out it was another. Subjective reality is so subject to error that I don't know how or why anyone would trust it to the degree that they would say that it's more trustworthy than objective reality. Yeah,
actually, that is perhaps the strongest point. If you've ever been to a magic show, they're playing on how easy it is to fool your subjective perception of reality. And not just magic shows like David Copperfield, magic shows like preachers who wave their hands and have people fall over. They just arrested a guy not too long ago for having this little electrical device, and he was going around doing the electric touch gimmick. Holy crap, we're out of time. I'm not going to get to the last call. Thanks again for everybody who watched. We hopefully will be on again next week.
Sue can email.
Anybody who didn't get on can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself and everybody else. I apologize to the last caller that's on there. Hang on the line. Well, she's hung up. We'll be going to IHOP. Everybody's invited to come down as long as you're not coming down to stir up trouble. We've got the room from 5 to 7, and we'll see you all next week.